Copyright the University of Auckland. All rights reserved. The content and delivery of lectures in this course are protected by copyright. Material belonging to others may have been used in these lectures and copied by and solely for the educational purposes of the university under license. You may record the lectures for the purposes of private study or research, but you may not upload onto any third-party site, make a further copy, or sell, alter, or further reproduce or distribute any part of these lectures to any other person. Failure to comply with the terms of this warning may expose you to legal action for copyright infringement by the copyright owner and/or disciplinary action by the university.
We'll get started in a second. I'll just wait for a few people to trickle in. Great, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for being here to find out more about the master's programs in psychology. I just thought I'd give you a brief overview for how the session is going to run today. And I will let you know that we are recording it just for future students to have access to this as well. So hopefully you can see my slide that has the overview of what's going to happen today. So we'll start off by just giving some brief overview of the master's programs and particularly the research master's program. And then we'll have different people pop in and out to talk about their specific programs. So at 3:50-ish, Leishan will come and talk about the master's in organizational behavior. At around 4:05, Claire is going to come talk about the master's in speech and language therapy practice. I should have got the whole thing there and not had the acronym. At 4:20, Alex Taylor is going to talk about a new program about behavioral insights. And then we can just keep the remaining time for questions. But of course, please feel free to put questions in the chat at any point or raise your hand if you have questions that you would like to ask. So I'll just start by saying that, yeah, thanks so much for being here and showing interest. I know some of you are maybe undergrads right now, or some of you are maybe doing your PG dip or honors and are wondering what the research master's looks like in psychology. So I think the most important thing for me to say off the bat is that the master's is a 1 year if we're talking about the Masters of Science or the research master's. And really, you don't have to do any courses. It's just all focused on doing your dissertation. So I think for some students, that's really great. And that really excites them that they have all of that time to focus on research. But some people are terrified by that prospect, right? Because you really do have a whole year of open time where you're just supposed to research and write and conduct, data analyses and things like that day in, day out. So I think just knowing that from the outset can help you think about whether the Masters of Science is a good fit for you. If you're currently in your honors year, you can kind of think of the master's thesis as similar to the honors thesis, but much bigger, right? So at the end of your Masters of Science, you would essentially produce a thesis of maybe 30 to 40,000 words. So it's a big document, but it's definitely doable and your supervisor will help you. Also, Suzanne and Cheryl, please feel free to jump in if I misspeak at any point. I'm fairly new to the master's role, so I'm always learning things as the students are learning things.
Shall I just comment, and Cheryl, you correct me. My understanding is if you've done psychology at undergrad, you either declare an arts or a science degree, but if you have a Bachelor of Arts in psychology, you can actually go into a Master of Science in psychology. So it's open to students who come through an arts or a science track to go into the MSc. And
Great.
there are other possibilities to do it in arts, but when you're talking about MSc, that's for everybody who's done psychology.
Yes, yeah, it's if you've done an arts undergraduate or honors, there is a clause where it's an equivalent degree, because all the subjects were the same anyway.
Oh, and we got a good question in the chat, which is my big disclaimer. I should have made clear on here. The Masters of Health Psych is actually run through a different faculty. So that's through the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences. So I know nothing about it.
But the answer is yes to Fiona.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know this, but Suzanne will know this.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really great point too, because I often get asked questions about the Masters of Health Science, and it is run from FMHS. So I always direct people there, but they are doing some great health psych research there. So definitely worth looking into that for sure. Great. I guess the other main thing to kind of get off sort of straight away about the research masters is that, or the MSc, is that it is contingent on you finding a supervisor who is willing to supervise you. So unlike, say, the honors year where we allocate people, for the masters, your admission is contingent on you finding a research supervisor who will take you on. So part of the leftover time there at the end of the session, I thought we could use if people have questions about, oh, I'm really interested in cultural psych, who might I want to approach, and things like that. But yeah, so thinking ahead to securing a master's supervisor can be really helpful. If you're an undergrad, it might be getting to know your lecturers so that you build a rapport with them. Or maybe you want to approach someone who's taught you a PG course if you're currently in your postgrad. And so it really is important to get someone to agree to supervise you to get into the master's. And one of the things I recommend people do is when they're reaching out to potential supervisors, do a little bit of homework, show that you would be a good fit for that person. And so I recommend people send out emails where they give a bit of information about who they are, why they want to work with you, attach your transcript and a resume if you have one, and never take it personally if you don't get a response back. Sometimes it's okay to follow up a month later. We get way more emails than I ever realized before I was a professor. So it doesn't mean just don't take it to heart if you don't get a response back. It just has nothing to do with you. Don't take it personally, I promise.
Can I just Jess, somebody asked a question about the MA versus MSc thesis. They're identical 120-point pieces of research, which are very big, as Jess said. And really people's decision to go into one or other is just really dictated by what they did previously, but there is no reason why people can't just do an MSc in psychology. And the content, as Jess said, is dictated by your area of interest and the supervisor that you find.
And I see too, that's some great questions in the chat about getting into the MOrg and MSc, but I see you answered them, Suzanne, and I feel like I'm sure Claire and Leishan will be able to speak more to that kind of thing as well. And I know there was a question that Cheryl's answered about the supplementary application form. And I believe as well, when you apply for a master's, you do give a little brief overview of what your project would be. It's just, a couple paragraphs about what you would study with your supervisor, and just your supervisor confirms that they've been willing to take you on.
I think if I can just say, it's all we need really is a research title and the very smallest paragraph of a research proposal, and attached to that is the email confirmation from the supervisor. So the whole thing is your negotiation skills with the supervisor.
That's perfect. That's actually really good to know, Cheryl, too, because I sometimes make my students write these amazing summaries, but seems like more of a formality. The MSc does not lead to clinical registration, if that's what the question was.
But it can be part of a program that leads to registration. If, for example, it was the thesis part of the applied behavior analysis program. But people shouldn't be doing the master's research thesis to get clinical registration. It should be part of a plan to have the clinical program plus the master's thesis, if that's the way that people are planning to go down that path.
Great. And I think one of the questions I missed earlier was, how do we find a supervisor, and is there a list of supervisors? And there is a list of people who have projects on the Find a Thesis page. And I know there's a list that Cheryl has. I forget the exact name of it, where people list sort of the types of topics they're willing to supervise projects for postgrad, which usually includes masters. It's not as formal as, like, say for honors, there's a list of people who say, yes, I'm taking honors students. So I also encourage students to even just look at our faculty webpage, look at the areas of research that really interest you, and then email the people listed there, right? So if you're into CogNeuro, go to that section on our website, see who's listed under there, and then, give them a quick Google and, read some of their stuff and see if you would be a good fit. And then just, I know it feels uncomfortable, but it's usually just like a cold email saying, hi, so-and-so, I'm a undergrad student at, or I guess it would be, I'm an honors or PG dip student, and I'm really interested in studying this with you. And then attaching, like I'm saying, a little bit of information about yourself and seeing if they're taking students. Oh, perfect. Yeah. Awesome. You got the link there. Yeah.
So there are two areas that I would suggest having a look at. The first one is in the honors application page. There is that list that you were talking about. Now, those are honors supervisors, but it gives an idea of what master supervision could be in. But the other one is the link that I've just put up, which if you go on there, they've all got tabs across the different research areas. They've got tabs across to the academic profiles.
And
and so if their name, just because their name isn't on the honours, doesn't mean that they're not taking somebody in a master's.
I guess the other thing that people could do if they wanted to be very laborious is they could go to the Who Are Our People page. And when you click on the person, then it goes to their uni directory page. That, the link to the Find a Thesis, that's being phased out, and they're going to have everybody go to the updated version of the uni directory page. But I think it's a project that's happening this year, and it won't be in time for the next round of applications. So the best thing is Cheryl and I both put the same link up to the research areas and then the people page to get ideas.
Well, what I would just tell people to be aware of when they're in the people page is make sure that you're not looking at an honorary professor or an emeritus or a research assistant, because they all come up on those same pages as well.
Yeah.
Very true. Good tips. I was like, I'm learning so much already. And I think too, oh, okay. Yeah. I'm going to let that question, I think one of you guys should tackle.
Cheryl, that's your question, Cheryl.
What I was going to say as well, while Cheryl answers that, is also just a tip in terms of when reaching out to supervisors. I think you should also be, if you are genuinely open to a lot of different areas, I would make that clear in your email as well. So sometimes I get emails where someone's like, hey, can you supervise me on a project looking at, and they're very, very specific. They're like Tinder use among in this scenario. And that might not be something that's like on my radar right now. But if a student says, I'm genuinely interested in any research on romantic relationships, I'm particularly interested in online dating, but I'm open to helping on a variety of projects, that might help you get a more favorable response, just so that it seems like you are willing to pursue a lot of different projects under the supervisor. Just something to be aware of as well. So you kind of want to have that balance of knowing that you are a good fit with the supervisor, but not seeming like you would only research one thing, because you never know if maybe they no longer are into that topic or something like that. So little things like that can help increase your chances of getting a favorable response back.
I'm just, maybe I'll just talk to Fiona's question. The pathway to clinical does vary a bit across the university program. So at the University of Auckland, it's a doctorate, a clinical doctorate, but other universities have a pathway to clinical accreditation that is a master's level pathway. So and I don't know, but it may be possible at another university to have a master's in health psychology and then fill it in with other content to make it a full clinical accreditation, but that wouldn't work at the University of Auckland, that particular pathway to clinical psychology. There is a scope, of course, for a health psychologist to be registered, but that's a different, and we're not the experts on that. Cheryl might know.
What I can tell you, other universities will have a master's or a PhD alongside a postgraduate diploma in clinical psychology. So it's the postgraduate diploma in clinical psychology that gives you the registration, but you need to have a master's to be able to do that. And that's the New Zealand Psychologists Board legal requirement.
Yeah, and George's right, Massey do the masters, so do a few other of the universities, the 6 universities that have clinical programs.
Every university except for Lincoln has a clinical program. At AUT, it's called Counselling Psychology. Massey and Auckland have the Doctorate of Clinical Psychology.
And I think there was the question as well as from a psych honors, how do you then go to clinical registration? And I think the answer we sort of hinted at, but it would be to try to apply to the DCLIN if you want to stay at the University of Auckland, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
So clinical honours has specific courses in it. So sometimes people have done some of those honours in their psych honours program, and they just need to pick up the missing courses, and then they go into the clinical doctorate. Cheryl, you can probably answer that better than me.
Yeah, so if you have a master's, then you still are applying for the Doctor of Clinical Psychology, and the first year, the preparatory year, would be a part-time year for the compulsory required courses that you haven't taken under honours. Your master's or your honours research project must be a B+ minimum, and you may or may not have all the required courses, but you would have that part-time preparatory year. So it doesn't matter what level degree you come in with, clinical is always going to start with a preparatory year.
Yeah, and the Doctor of Clinical Psychology, the DCP, is 3 years, but it may be possible to do it after a master's through another university in a shorter amount of time.
Yeah, you would need to talk to other universities about what their requirements are.
Yeah. No one's ever too old, Fiona.
I think there was a question about if you apply and get accepted, then do you enroll in student services?
I think you have to apply, Cheryl, don't you, at the same time?
So, yeah, I did answer, but I think it's what I was answering. What you need to do is apply through 2 methods. You apply through Student Services Online. You also apply through our supplementary application forms. They go hand in hand, so it makes it quicker. So when our postgraduate committee meet, or you're given the offer for a position in either honours or masters, then it makes it easier to go in and update your student services to make that a formal offer. Once you accept that formal offer, then you can enrol in the courses. But none of that happens. It all happens at the same time. Masters is a little bit different. If you're doing a master's, it's an individual enrolment, and we never run out of space. We don't have a limit in the space. It's limited by the supervisor's agreement. So it's not like and this is the general masters, of course, not the name masters. Honours is a little bit different, and all honours applicants will get their offer on the same day.
I think one of the difficulties is people having supervision capacity, and it's good to remind people that it's quite a good thing to have 2 supervisors. You can have co-supervision for a master's, and that the second supervisor doesn't have to be in our School of Psychology. They could be in criminology or sociology or psychological medicine. So they can be outside of the school, the second supervisor, so that can relieve the burden of the primary supervisor if they already have a lot of students.
That's a great point. And we can pivot soon to talking about MORG. But before we do that, I think the other thing I forgot to mention is that there are 3 times during the year that the MSc students can start. So the most popular is starting on March 1st. There also is a group that you can start early July or December 1st. So there are some options there. No matter when you start, your thesis is due a year following. So if you start March 1st, your thesis is due at the end of Feb the year following. So again, to recap, that's March 1st, July 1st, December 1st that you can start.
Or she's one of the organizers of the course.
I'll just turn off now while Li-Jin is going to talk, but I'll come back later.
Perfect. Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I will introduce Li-Shin, who is here to talk to us about the Masters of Org program. Thanks, Li-Shin.
Can you see my slides? Am I showing? Okay. I'm the director for Master of Organizational Psychology. I will talk about that program. What are you saying now? What are you saying? No grading? No. Are you seeing my slides or something else?
Not anymore. Now we see your all your files and stuff.
Okay, sorry. Okay. So the Master of, I'm just going to do this way. The Master of Organizational Psychology is 180 points. So it's 1.5 years in total. Not like other one, you have to start in semester 1. There is no other option. So you have to start in semester 1, which is usually March of each year. You have 2 options. One is that you can do a taught master or you can do a research master. So the taught master and the research master both have some components in terms of the same compulsory. There are 45 points compulsory. One is organizational psychology. Another one is stats, and then is occupational health. So that's the other same in both components. And then the later part, the difference part is in research and taught is that the taught master have more selectives. There are 90 points selectives in taught master that translate into 6 selective classes across the whole 1.5 years. On the other hand, the research master that have only 45 points selectives. So you will have 3 options in terms of selectives. So those selectives together is include classes from psychology as well as classes from business school. Finally, the major differences is that the taught master have a smaller components of research paper, which we call research dissertation. That's 45 points in total. And that is about 5,000 words, does not include abstract references, tables, and figure or appendix. So that's about 15 pages double-spaced of the writing, the text itself. On the other hand, the taught research master that have bigger components of research paper, we call it the research thesis, that have 90 points. Okay, so that's translated into around 8,000 words. That's about 25 pages and double spaced. So that's the structure of the program. With this degree, there are a lot of different job titles, which I will cover later. But I will cover a little bit about the frequently asked questions. So first one is that whether you want to do a research or taught. So it's one, it depends on what you want to do in the future. Do you want to work in the field, or do you want to continue to do a PhD, or you have a huge interest in research, or you are more preferred to have taught classes. So one thing to notice is that if you do research masters, you spend more time doing research as opposed to take classes. So if you take more classes, it's gonna allow you to be exposed to more, I would say more coverage of possible for the more coverage in terms of content. Research is definitely more concentrated in, allow you to become an expert in the research topic you will be doing. But in generally speaking, if your GPA is the first semester of the class, on average, if your GPA is B and above, then you will have the option to do research or taught. If your GPA does not reach that point, which is 5.0, then you have to do a taught master. Second, often asked question is that do I need an honor degree before applying? No, you don't need an honor degree before you apply. You can apply straight after you get your bachelor degree. But the priority, of course, given to students who have honors and they have a good GPA. Another question is about the registrations. So this degree does not allow you to register. If you are interested in the field relevant to organizational psychology, the good news is that you don't need, it's not required for you to have registration or become a registered psychologist. The reason being that our clients often to be the most likely and organizations, so they do not require protection from the government, as opposed to individuals that who are if you know the clinical psychologists, they require registration because their clients are individuals who want to be protected, and it's much easier to manipulate individuals as opposed to organizations. So that's the part about registration. And also, you do not need to have work experiences. So if you want to get into this degree without any work experience, that's absolutely okay. In terms of recruitment, the primary thing we look at is GPA. As I mentioned, you don't need a work experience. So the only thing we can look at is actually just GPA. And also the priority is given to students who have some research experiences, although it's not required, but you know, if you have some, as I mentioned, if you have honor degree, you have some work research experiences, that's definitely preferred. And also given to people who will do full-time. We didn't take any part-time in the previously. That's could be an option, but it's not priority. And definitely currently it's only open to domestic students. In terms of the job in the future, there are a bunch of different job titles I gathered from this website. Most of them is relevant to consulting and consulting for the organizations, and also working for the human resources department within the department, but not necessarily in terms of recruiting, because we are more likely to address the problems occurred in the organization as opposed to help with the recruiting or hiring process. And I talk about a little bit in the previous section. I hope you'll have, I don't want to make the section too redundant. So the rest of the time I want to leave to the questions if you have any. So I'm gonna stop sharing.
Great, thanks. There was a good question in the chat about whether you could go on to a PhD from both the taught and research track, MOrg.
Yes, so I believe the answer is yes. You can go on to PhD with through both track. That's the last time I heard. But I would encourage you to do a research stream if you wanted to continue for PhD. You will have a better idea. As I said, it's decided in the second semester, so it's 3 semesters in total. Basically, at the end of the first semester, you can decide whether you want to do research or taught. So at that moment, you should have a very good idea. And also you can talk to me and Zhitong, who is another person in the program, about your preferences. So we will help you in terms of, you know, whether you want to pursue research or taught track, and also help you if you want to do a PhD. If you are doing a taught master, yes, you still need a supervisor because you still have a research component. You still have a research component, which is 45-point thesis that is still supervised by me and Zhitong. Are there any alumni in the roles mentioned? Yes. So I do have students who I do have students who were doing some of these roles, and I will also invite my colleagues who are working in the field to give talks to students in the master program. So they will talk about their working experiences for being a consultant, for being a team leader, working inside organizations as an in-house consultant, or working outside as the consulting firm, and there are also people do self-employment. They themselves open their own consulting firms. Yes, there are people working in these job titles. Do you need recommendation letter? Oh God, I don't. Yes, so for the master degree, you do need a recommendation letter. I believe we require 2 recommendation letters, but this is not like intensive long. It's quite short. Yes, we have that. Supervisor. So there are only me and Zhitong are supervisors. We haven't. There are discussion about co-supervisor with people from business school, but we haven't pursued that route yet. This is just a new program, so this is the next year will be the 2nd year. So in the future, it might be possibility to co-supervisor with people in the business school, but currently it's just me and Zhitong as a supervisor.
Listen, there was a question Erica was asking about gaining research experience if we are going from bachelor's to the master degree, not from an honor, that we didn't address yet.
Okay, thank you, Zhitong. So for the research experience, yes, if you directly go from bachelor to this degree, I think the opportunity to get research experience is not much. Like you have very few opportunities to do that. As I said, you do not require to have research experiences, although it will be given priority. But we do have students, like this year, we do have students who directly coming from bachelor degree, and she's doing great, even though she didn't have research experiences. So we have 10 openings. That of course depends on who will apply. So that's will determine whether your application is competitive or not. And after you, I want to go back to the research question. So within, even though just me and Zhitong to supervise your research, but the topic is quite open. We pretty much cover everything within organizational psychology. And also we do a lot of negotiation with students to make sure the topics of research is satisfactory to both your interest and within our expertise. So there are a lot of options within this supervision, even though it's just 2 of us.
So Jessica was providing a very good suggestion about gaining some research experience before doing like if you're not doing an honor. Thanks, Jessica. And the other thing is, if you will be interested in the Master of Organizational Psychology program, we would encourage you to reach out to us, like just having conversations with us, and we can help you figure out what are some of the possible ways that you can gain some research experience, or whether this is like a best fit for you.
Yes. Get contact with us to say, if you want to know more about it. 308 definitely is a very good options. Even your research is actually with somebody else in the department or in a different department, that's any research experience a good experience. You don't necessarily need to be within our field. Like we also we take, especially for example, if you're working in social psychology, that's definitely highly relevant. If you have have experience with business school, that's also relevant. Okay. Any other questions?
One question you might have covered that I can imagine people asking is, when is the application process and when do people find out when they're accepted?
So the application, I think it's the same as other. Okay, I should not say, I don't know. So last year, I can say last year was the end of November. I think it's the 1st of December last year's application deadline. I'm assuming it should be fairly similar this year. We decided before Christmas, so you will have good news before Christmas. You can have a good Christmas experience. So that's the timing where the decision will be available to students. Okay, all right, that's great. So if you have, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or Zhitong or you want to have a chat, that's anytime would be fine.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for that. That was really helpful. And it seems like such a great program. It's glad we're all excited that we have it now.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thanks so much. We can turn over then now to Claire, who's going to talk about speech and language. Thanks so much, Claire.
Yes, thank you. Now I need to share my screen and my sound because I've got a little wee video for us all. How do I do that? Apologies to those of you who saw this yesterday. You will find that there's a little bit of similarity in what I'm going to be showing. Why is that not coming up? Oh, there we go. So I'm just going to be talking about the Masters of Speech Language Therapy practice. I am actually going to talk about a research Masters in Speech Science as well, but I'm just going to begin by talking to you about speech language therapy because that's the main course that we teach. And hopefully this little video will work, which is from the New Zealand Speech Language Therapy Association website. So a bit of a 1.5 minute video on what speech language therapists do.
What does a speech language therapist do? They help people of all ages communicate, from young children in kohanga reo and kindergartens to older people who have had an illness. We all need to be able to talk. Our reo is a big part of who we are. I remember when my koro had a stroke. He couldn't speak for a few weeks. He was so frustrated. The speech language therapist worked with him every day in the hospital to help him get his words out and swallow kai safely. They also work with babies and toddlers having trouble feeding and adults with swallowing difficulties, like after a brain injury or cancer. It was a speech language therapist who helped when my cousin was born and he wasn't feeding well. They are experts on all areas of the brain, mouth, throat, and voice box. They even have these new roles in the courts now, communication assistants, helping those on trial and those giving evidence if they have difficulty with language or communication. Speech language therapists work in so many different places. If you or your whānau need help with communication or swallowing, look for a qualified speech language therapist registered with the NZSTA.
So that's what speech language therapists do. Obviously, this is a generic video just explaining it for anybody who needs to know or wants to know. But for people who are interested in becoming a speech language therapist, for some reason my slide's not zooming forward. Might have to do it the old-fashioned way.
What does this...
Right, here we go. So just looking at what our postgraduate options within speech science include, and of course speech science is one of the arms within the School of Psychology. So there's an option of doing a postgraduate diploma specifically in speech science rather than in psychology. And I've put a little asterisk here because if you're thinking that you might want to become a speech language therapist, then you can't enter into speech therapy by doing a postgrad diploma. If you do a postgraduate diploma in speech science, that makes you ineligible to do the speech therapy master's degree. So that's for quite a separate type of an option for people who want a 1 year of taught courses and things that are relevant within speech science that you might then want to pursue to go on to some completely different area in communication or within engineering or Suzanne, you're going to have to jump in and give me some other options because I can't think off the top of my head who else would do postgrad diploma in speech science.
Sometimes it's people who already have a qualification.
Oh, yeah.
Or linguistics background.
Yeah, thank you. The next option we've got for people is an MSc in speech science. So that's pretty similar to the other MScs that you've been hearing about today, which is it's a research-only pathway, usually 1 year, and that's a bit like what Jess was talking about. There's a couple of times in the year when you can apply for and enrol and start an MSc in speech science. The main one that I'm going to be talking about for the next couple of minutes is the MSLT prac, so Masters of Speech Language Therapy practice, and that is a 2-year taught degree, but it does have a research component to it. And then, of course, that can all of those options can lead on to doing a PhD in speech science, which is independent research that people might want to do. So then a bit more specifically about the MSLT prac. The applications open on the 1st of July every year and stay open until the 1st of October. So you've got 3 more weeks, just under 3 more weeks to apply if you want to. And the application process includes or requires you to have the supplementary application form and 2 confidential references. So you ask people to write the references and they send them directly to us. They don't send them to you and you pass them on. In order to be eligible for this degree, you need to have a GPA of 5 or higher and 60 points at stage 3 level. And you need to have them in related subjects. And my next slide has got a list of all of the related subjects that you might, or relevant courses that you might have been taking. And then just a little bit more information for you. We interview about 50 people, so just under 100 people apply, sort of in the high 90s apply. We interview about 50 and we have available 20 places. We've actually asked the university if we can increase that up to 24 places. And depending on what happens with borders being open or not, sadly not now, we would be able to have up to 24 people, including international students. This is the relevant subject areas, so you can do either a BSc or a BA. We know it doesn't matter which pathway you take in psychology or something like linguistics, education. So it might be a Bachelor of Education, might be health science, sociology, anthropology. Suzanne talked about criminology. Combinations of any of these things are all considered relevant, and as long as you've got good grades, so a GPA of 5 or more in your stage 3 courses, and shown that you're able to complete your undergraduate degree, then you're likely to be eligible for the MSLT prac. And then just the last little bit is kind of typically what happens during the day. So it is 2 years full-time over the course of the degree. And within each semester, there are 3 what we call academic courses and 1 clinical course. So the clinical component, the speech therapy clinical component, is interspersed throughout the entire degree. And what the clinical component consists of is placements either at the university clinic or a combination of the university clinic and external placements. So in schools, hospitals, settings throughout the country, or in the olden days when the borders were open, we would also be able to have students in their clinical placements overseas in Australia or Canada, and a couple we've had in the US. Clearly, that's not an option at the moment. So within New Zealand placements and, yeah, like I said, schools and hospital settings throughout the entire country. And it's quite an intense course. We start in February and finish in December, and we tend to do our teaching in blocks. And so every day, like on a Monday, there'll be a 3-hour lecture and a 2-hour lab or tutorial. Then a Tuesday will be a different topic, 3-hour lecture, 2-hour lab or tutorial. So you kind of, instead of having courses interspersed throughout the week, they're in blocks. And so it's pretty clear every Monday is going to be whatever, the anatomy course, and every Tuesday will be the child speech course, and every Thursday will be swallowing or whatever it is, as well as the clinical courses and the clinical placements that are interspersed. That's the end of my slide sharing, and so I'm really just open for questions. I'm sorry, I haven't been looking in the chat if anyone typed in any questions.
None in there so far, but I'm hoping to get some. That was a great presentation, Claire. Thank you so much.
Thanks. I did talk yesterday, and some people, I can recognise a couple of names who were at the PG session yesterday that Cheryl was coordinating, so I might have doubled up for some people. Apologies for that.
Claire, did you say the application date? Yeah, good.
1st of October.
Since it's imminent.
Yep.
Yep.
Cool, great not to have any questions.
Yeah.
Either it means it was really crap, or it means I answered everyone's questions so they didn't have to ask them.
It was very clear.
I don't mind either way.
No, I think it was very clear, and you anticipated a lot of questions, which is great.
Actually, one thing I guess to point out for our applied programs is the need for people to have evidence of immunizations as part of the requirement. So if there are challenges around immunizations, that's something to have a discussion sooner rather than later with Claire and the clinical and the ABA people. Do you want to comment on that, Claire?
Yeah, good point, Suzanne. Thank you. So in order for people to be able to go into clinical placements, they need to be vaccinated. Now, in the past, we've always had people compiling their own vaccination passports, so things like hepatitis and the kind of more obvious ones, diphtheria and all of that lot. But of course, now we've got a new vaccine to throw into the mix, and quite a few of the places, particularly the hospital settings, will not allow you to do a clinical placement unless you are vaccinated. And of course, it's a big chunk of the course that you do your clinical placements. If you don't have your clinical placements, then you can't demonstrate your competency and therefore you can't complete the degree. So it's a bit of a backdoor kind of requirement for people to actually be immunised and fully immunised against COVID. So yeah, that's becoming a really important consideration, which we haven't had to think about before. And obviously it's easy now for people to get their vaccination, but of course some people might have views on whether or not they want to be, but that would be a definite ineligibility for the clinical courses.
Yeah.
All right, last chance for questions for Claire before we turn it over to Alex.
Alex is all ready and waiting.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Claire. That was very helpful.
Thanks, Jess.
Appreciate it.
Okay, thanks.
All right, well, so Alex is here to tell us about a brand new program and behavioral insights. So Alex, I will let you take it away and you're welcome to share your screen if you have slides.
I do. Thanks, Jess. Kia ora, everyone. Let me just bring up here, if I can find it, my PowerPoint. Okay, well, it's great to be here, everyone. Sorry it has to be over a screen, but I hope, despite that, I can give you a good idea of what our new program is about. Myself and Quentin Atkinson have set it up, and we're really excited to be introducing this kind of area to psychology and more generally to the university. So the title here is the University of Auckland Behavioural Insights Exchange. So in a nutshell, what this does is allow students at a master's level to do a one-year thesis where they work alongside industry and government organizations to apply knowledge of the cognitive biases that humans show to real-world problems. So just to kind of start us off, I just want to give a little bit of a background here of what I mean when I say cognitive bias. So as humans, we often like to think of ourselves as being the pinnacle of rationality, the smartest animals on the planet. You know, we like to compare our intelligence to that of other agents in our environments and see what is different and what is similar. So we often compare ourselves to animals, and more lately, we've obviously been comparing our intelligence to that of artificial agents and seeing, you know, how we do. And we often like to focus on our cognitive strengths, you know, our ability to plan, to imagine, to be creative, to think about the world in deep ways. And while we obviously have all those skills, just because we're able to reason, doesn't mean that we use these skills all the time. And one of the kind of biggest areas in behavioral economics and psychology that's kind of emerged over the last 30 years and led to Daniel Kahneman, who I'm sure some of you have heard of, actually winning the Nobel Prize, was this idea of cognitive biases and heuristics, this idea that actually a lot of the time our thought processes aren't nearly as rational as we might assume them to be. In actual fact, we make a lot of mistakes in how we think. We don't always actually think things through and actually act in our own best interests. And this led not just to kind of a change in, you know, how we think about our own minds, but also in the realization that potentially we can actually change our thinking, that we can de-bias the mistakes that we make. We can get rid of those biases. We can nudge ourselves in our decision-making to make better quality decisions. Just to give you an idea of you know, specifically what I'm talking about when we talk about cognitive biases, just to make this all kind of straightforward for you and give you a real-world example. So again, some of you have probably heard of confirmation bias. So this is one that I'm sure all of you have used in the last couple of weeks. at least once. So it's a bias where we tend to favor information that confirms or strengthens our existing beliefs or values. So it's often called my side bias for this reason. So whatever you believe around the world, you're going to kind of see the world through the lens of those beliefs, as it were. And so what you'll do is you'll really, really attend to information that fits with your existing beliefs. As Schopenhauer says, you'll have lynx eyes. So lynx are a species of cat that has exceptional eyesight. And the idea is that we're really good at paying attention to the things that fit with our worldview. And we're also really good at ignoring or just simply forgetting information that doesn't fit with it. And so this obviously has massive impacts, not just on things like science, but also things like political debate. And this kind of explains why, when you've ever had any kind of political discussion, it'll often seem really bizarre how people with different political beliefs from you are seeing the world and evaluating evidence in completely different ways. And so this is a really nice example of how we're not just rationally assessing all the information around us in a very neutral way and then coming up with the hypothesis of how the world works, but instead we've really got this filter in our minds based on what we already know. So it's not just obviously confirmation bias, there's actually many. So this is the Cognitive Bias Codex. This shows all the different biases that we've discovered so far that affect how we think, that prevent us from being rational. And as you can see, there is just a huge number of different biases and mistakes that we make in particular situations. We are not perfect thinkers. And this is obviously an issue. It's an issue for us as individuals. It's an issue for us as society as well. This knowledge has led to a new field. It's called behavioral insights. So behavioral insights is an approach that combines insights from psychology, cognitive science, and social science with empirically tested results to discover how humans actually make choices. So the idea is that we're doing psychological science, behavioral science in often real world situations to try to understand how people make choices and to try to help them to make better choices. Just to give you a little example of this, in a real world setting, this was a project that was run in Costa Rica a few years ago that tried to reduce water consumption. And so researchers, the government identified that there was a problem there with a lack of water and overuse of water. Again, something that affects Auckland in summer as well. And what they did was come up with a couple of very simple interventions that kind of use this behavioral insight approach in order to change people's behavior. So one of the biases that we have in our thinking is that we're really strongly influenced by social rules in particular. So we've evolved in social groups. Having a reputation in a group is really important. Following the social rules and getting those kind of things right has obviously been very important to us throughout our evolutionary history. So if you communicate to people that their behavior is out of sync with the rest of the group, so in this case, that people are using more water than the rest of their neighborhood, and that this is a bad thing, which, as you might be able to see here with the little frowny face, communicating to people that they are breaking a social rule leads them to prioritize the information sufficiently for them to actually want to change their behavior. So this is this idea of using social norms to kind of create behavioral change. Another way you can do this is actually simply by getting people to form concrete plans. So one of the errors we make is what's termed an under-planning error. This is where we might have really good intentions to want to change our behavior, but we then under-plan. We don't sit down and actually come up with a concrete series of steps that will actually allow us to change our behavior. So in this intervention, the researchers simply gave people some options of behaviors that they could change and just asked them to choose which behaviors they would try to change in order to reduce their water consumption. Both of these interventions were actually able to lead to around a 4 to 5% reduction in water use in Costa Rica. So extended to the entire city of Belen, where this study was conducted, this was around 6,000, just over 6,000 cubic meters per month of water being saved, which is around 188,000 showers. And I think this captures really nicely the behavioral insight approach. It's trying to find these kind of simple behavioral interventions based on our understanding of how humans are biased in the types of information they process and the errors they make, to create these relatively small at an individual level. 4 to 5% reduction for any one person isn't that big a deal, but when you scale that up to a population, suddenly you're creating real world change on a pretty impactful level. So that's the general approach. That's kind of behavioral insights in a nutshell. This is an area that is rapidly growing. So there are now over 200 organizations that are using behavioral insights in the public policy space all over the world. And again, this really wasn't an area that was even on anyone's radar as a kind of career path or as a particularly useful method until 10, 15 years ago. So the field is really expanding rapidly. Within New Zealand, the field is just getting established, but there's already teams using behavioral insights approaches at the Ministry of Justice, at IRD, at the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, Auckland Council, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet. And this is a really exciting time for behavioral insights in New Zealand. We know that it has worked in other places in the world and has led to real world change. And now, Quentin and I are really excited to be able to be bringing this opportunity to students to use your psychology degree to create real world change in business and government. It's not just Quentin and I that think this either. So this is a quote from Todd Rogers. You've actually already seen some of his research. It was his research that came up with this idea of making simple lists as a way of kind of dealing with the under-planning error that people show when they're trying to turn their intentions into behavior. And he is the professor of public policy at the Behavioral Insights Group, BIG, at Harvard University. And so he's argued that when leaders and individuals make decisions, an amazing array of changes can happen, including improving education systems, improving health, reducing discrimination, managing finances better, and protecting the environment. And this is, in a nutshell, is why I'm so excited by behavioral insights. So many of our real world problems really do boil down to the choices that we make, the behaviors that we do. And so if we have ways that we can help people make better decisions in their lives, I think that's a really nice way to actually create some change for ourselves individually and also for society as well. So if this is all sounding like something that interests you, then you might be interested in our new program. So the Behavioral Insight Exchange is going to pilot next year with industry partners. So we already have lined up PricewaterhouseCoopers, Auckland Council, and the Ministry of Justice. The idea here is that you'll be doing a 1 year's master's thesis research project under the supervision of either myself or Quentin, and then in collaboration with one of our industry partners. So the idea then is that you'll be working on a problem that the organization thinks is important and wants our help with. You'll be taking the skills that you've already developed in your degree, and then you'll be working with us to develop and gain industry relevant skills. So you'll be taking the knowledge of cognitive biases and errors that we have in our decision making and using them to address the challenges faced by our external partners. So what are we looking for here? So it's a pilot year next year. That means we're only going to be offering 4 places in this program. So it is relatively small to begin with. This is really important as we kind of develop our relationships with these great organizations that are kind of keen to work with Auckland University students. So if you're a high GPA student, you have excellent communication and social skills, good knowledge of statistics, and a passion for using real rigorous experimental design to tackle real world problems, this could well be for you. So if you have an honours or PG DIP qualification, or you're currently enrolled in honours or PG DIP, then please check out our website, and which you can, I should have put the link here actually, but it's not there, but I'll pop it in the chat now. And then also you can also apply to our email below. Thanks for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
I can ask a few to get the ball rolling while people think about things. Can you clarify, Alex, what you would graduate with? Is it a master's in
Just in psychology. So at the moment, we're not like an accredited program. This is just a master's in psychology, but you'll specialize in behavioral insights. So as part of your thesis project.
Perfect, thanks. And I can imagine we might have a couple students who would wonder, what is the main difference between this type of program versus doing a master's in organizational behavior? Because both of them seem to be talking about businesses and organizations, and both could set you up to be a behavioral consultant. So do you have suggestions of who would be a better fit for your program versus that?
I mean, obviously they're both great directions to go. And if you're interested in kind of working with business or with government, I guess behavioral insights is kind of pretty strongly focused on running kind of behavioral interventions in order to kind of find ways to change human behavior in order to, for like policy reasons or for government reasons. So it does require, I guess, people who have particularly strong statistical skills or have got particularly interested in experimental design. I think that would really fit with very nicely. But I mean, these are two different approaches to tackling problems in business, doing organizational psych or doing something that's kind of like directly embedded in industry. And again, if you already want to be working in industry straight away, again, this is a route towards doing that.
Can I ask Alex, apart from getting in touch with you and Quentin, will they fill in the usual master's application form?
That is a great question. I am not sure. I'm not sure they would, right? Because is the usual form, maybe Jess, maybe you can clarify this, like, is the usual form specific to a program, or does just everyone do that for any,
any MSc, yeah. So
yeah.
Cheryl, do you think that would be right, that they would just have to specify on their master's application form that it was for behavioral insights?
I think in the first instance, because of the new program, maybe it needs to come from Alex and Quentin, that they have agreed to take on these students and we can work with it from there.
That makes sense. So, I mean, I'll flag right now, obviously this is the pilot year, so there's still a few things for us to figure out about how it all fits together. I'll just pop in, by the way, I've just popped into the chat the link to our webpage if people want more information. But yeah, I think the first stage is really just to send a link to the email address, and then we'll figure things from there.
It's so great, Alex, that you already have those partners with industry.
Yeah, we're really excited by that. And again, the feedback from industry has been one of a great deal of enthusiasm for a lot of these organizations. I think the Ministry of Justice currently has 2 positions that they're looking to try to fill in this area, but are struggling to. So there's demand from our industry partners for people with skills in this area.
One question, since no one's putting in questions in the chat yet, I could see us being asked, if someone's thinking ahead, like say they're here and they're an undergrad and they're wanting to maybe do this in the future, do you have recommendations on, like, obviously taking your and Quentin's course is probably a good idea in postgrad, but are there any other tips on what someone could do to stand out or increase their chances to get into this program down the line?
I'm so glad you asked that, Jess, because I forgot to mention 770, our 4th year course that we are also running next year as well. So yeah, if you are a little bit earlier in your university career, then doing 770 would be really good. There's definitely a few other courses around the university running that are useful. And again, we'll kind of update our site once we've kind of got that final list. But I think really right now, more than anything, it will be having a keen interest in this area, if you are able to do our course next year, and then really any kind of expertise with stats, maybe with computer programming, with running experiments, anything like that is really great. So obviously, as the program gets set up, we'll obviously not be expecting students to have years of experience in this area before they apply, because this is all new. We totally get that. So it's really more about you as a person and the skills you have, and less about the knowledge. We'll be building that with you, essentially.
Alex, would it be good if people are going to do PG Dip or honours to do the Psych 744 with Karen, the quantitative research methods? Yeah, and maybe
absolutely.
students who've come through with Sarah Cowie, learning and behaviour, that's a good background too.
Yeah, we have spoken to Sarah actually. So like, we have a list of courses. We just haven't quite finalized exactly which ones we're going to be recommending. But yes, Sarah Cowie's course would definitely be one of those. And also in terms of building your skills in interesting areas in terms of statistics, like David Moreau's course as well. I forget the code as well, but like there's certainly some of his, maybe less so the subject area, but certainly some of those skills could be very useful.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have any questions for Alex before we let him go and just open it up to general questions?
Can I just say that sounds really exciting, Alex, and I wish I was
thanks, Claire.
Contemplating options. It sounds so cool.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I mean, it's great to hear that you're enthusiastic. We're really excited about this as well, and to feel that it's a shame that it isn't being offered already, because we think it's such a great area that there's lots of potential there. So yeah, we're really happy we can bring this to the School of Psychology and try and find a good try and build a good program around this.
Yeah. So with the pilot being 4 students, presumably you'll be measuring the success of that and then rolling it out over the following years.
Yeah, we anticipate that, but maybe like how big this gets, I think it'll probably be a fairly small program, to be honest, just simply because it's so important to manage our relationships with our industry partners that it'll need a fairly, we're really excited.
Short leash.
Yeah, well, not short leash, but we're really excited about that opportunity, and we're very grateful to these organizations. So, we really want to make sure that we build really good relationships with them. So keeping it small is probably the best way to ensure that.
Yeah, cool. I just really like the thought that it can have such a huge impact on society more broadly. And as you say, with that nice example, sort of doing something as an individual and the impact it can have. I think we're all really aware at the moment of how important and how powerful we can be as individuals, but how even more powerful when we, club together and sort of scale it up and all act responsibly.
Yeah, cool. I couldn't agree more. I feel that's the real strength there.
And quite good to see that government agencies are paying attention to such things.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I'm not sure they did for a while, but the success of the Behavioural Insights Unit in the UK has really spurred, I mean, that was maybe 10 years ago or so, but they've had so many successes now that it's everyone, you just need to get momentum going, and then it becomes this, runaway train essentially. So yeah, right now is a very good time to be building these skills and showing what we can do as psychologists to help everyone.
Great.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alex.
Thanks.
Seems like a great program.
Thank you. Thanks you all for listening. I hope if there's any other questions or people want to get in touch, then obviously just hit us up on email, and we hope this is of interest to the students at the school.
Great. And one last question before you go. I just realized I'm not sure if you mentioned the deadline.
Yeah, that's because we haven't decided yet on a deadline. Like we'll probably update the website. Yeah, exactly. So what out of interest, what deadlines do all your other programs tend to use?
December 1st.
December 1st.
The Masters program itself doesn't really have an official deadline because of like the Masters of Science, because of that negotiation. And often you might want to see what the grades are coming through from honours before that. Honours, PG Dip, the applied programs are either the 1st of November or the 1st of December. Speech Science, 1st of October.
Right. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I think probably we'll probably just see how we go. I imagine somewhere around 1st of December, maybe later. But again, it's our first year. We have a small number of students, so we have flexibility there. So if anyone's sitting there going, "Oh God, I couldn't start until then," or then we're happy to try to figure things out.
I think student services, the students get told the 1st of December as the deadline for the master's thesis. So
Okay, well in that case, it'll definitely be that.
We're very flexible with that, so we're
But
still.
then if students
taking it then.
contact us, as Cheryl says, we try to accommodate, but probably for you, because you have to talk to the company, the partners, it may be that you'll have to have a final deadline so that you can give them some confidence.
Yeah, we'll be setting up. We're kind of getting the conversations already going on around the projects now, you know, so that we can bring students in. So it won't be I agree. We'll probably have to have something around then.
Yeah.
And Alex, does that email address, the behavioural-insight, go to you and Quentin?
Yeah, it does. It's just a separate account that we'll be checking.
Cool.
Very good.
All right. Thanks for having me talk, everyone. I really enjoyed that and great to chat with you all.
Hopefully you'll have lots of great applications, Alex.
That'll be very nice. I hope so.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. See you.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. And just for people are free to leave whenever. That's kind of the end of the formal programming, if you will. But Cheryl, Suzanne, and I were okay to stick around for a little while longer if you have specific questions you wanted to ask, or if anything's unclear. I know it's a lot to digest. And, if you have a certain research area you're keen on and you're not having trouble finding advisors, we can give some help and advice on that. But yeah, feel free to unmute or put a question in the chat if you have any.
Hi, I've got a question. If we have, for the general master's research, if we are starting in December, or that's the hope to start in December, when should we have our kind of application roughly? Like, I know it's kind of flexible, but kind of what the deadline we should work towards with our supervisor?
Okay, to get your actual application in, so there'll be two parts. There'll be the Student Services Online, there'll be the supplementary application. It would be really good if we could have it by the middle of November. The earlier the better, although some of it will be dependent on waiting for your final honours grades, because you can't enrol until your honours grades have come through. But we would hope to have it, at least we can have an offer, a conditional offer to you at that point.
So middle of November.
Yeah, that's preferable for a 1st of December start, yes.
I mean, in theory, people can be late up to 2 weeks into the start, but given that the clock starts, as Jess said, on the day you enroll in your master's thesis and you have your 12 calendar months, you really do want to be in good shape, ready to start on the 1st of December and not still doing paperwork, ideally. Yeah.
There's a question about when applications should be in for the 1st of March. I know there's an official guideline somewhere, but I think it's about the same. Would you say, Cheryl, that we'd want it by early Feb latest?
So the Student Services Online will tell you the 1st of December is the cutoff. It's as I said, it is flexible. So if you're still negotiating with the supervisor, we can do it through January and February. Even if you can't apply on Student Services Online, I still have the ability to go in and put the application in once you've been accepted anyway. Mm-hmm. If you haven't got it in by the 1st of December, don't panic. Just carry on with that research proposal or that negotiation or finding a supervisor. It can be done right up until about a week before semester starts, but for my own workload sanity, I ask not to leave it that late. And then you have the whole study link things as well. That if you leave it, the later you leave it, you've got to go through that whole study link application process. You'd start without having that short, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah. And if you're struggling with finding a supervisor, between Jess, Cheryl and I, as long as we have an indication of area, we can give you a steer in the right direction in terms of who might be in that area and who might have capacity.
Yeah, and there was a great question from Annabelle about when would you want to start having those conversations. And I think even if you're thinking of March 1st, I think now is actually the time. I know it seems very early, but it's the earlier the better. And I know speaking for myself, like sometimes I do fill up fairly quickly. So I think the earlier you can kind of lock yourself in, the better. And it's not like no one's going to think it's weird. We're used to getting emails around this time of year with that. And I mean, you can attach any grades you have for the year so far, but we would know that, you know, your honors grades aren't finalized and things like that. But I do really encourage you to start reaching out just in case, you know, you might have someone who you really want to work with and they tell you, it takes them a week to get back to your email and they say they're going to be on leave next year, so they can't take a student. And so then you have to go find someone else to reach out to. And so I think starting that process as soon as you can is smart.
Mm. And you don't need to feel that you have to have a sophisticated idea to approach somebody. You know, apart from introducing yourself, you can say, I'm very interested in the area of, you know, developmental psychology or working with adolescents or something. And are you open to the idea of a master's student next year? And then just starting the conversation without feeling that you have to craft a whole idea before that initial conversation. Do you think, Jess?
Yeah, I think so. And I think especially too, like I was saying, like sometimes people go too far the other way and they're like, I'm specifically interested, and they go really, really specific. And so I think it's okay to have something general. And, you know, often for me, students will say like, I was in your lectures for 311 and 204, and I really loved that content. And so I'm really interested in relationship psychology. And I'm like, cool, great. Like, I don't expect much more than that, because, you know, then we can jump off the conversation from there. And that was a good question too. So about whether most students stick with their honors supervisor or not necessarily. I think it's a mix. Suzanne and Cheryl might know more than that than me, but I think there's advantages and disadvantages, right? So, I mean, staying with your current honors supervisor, you can often keep up the momentum. You know what they're like to work with. You might have projects that are ongoing that you can kind of keep going for your masters. But you know, working with someone else is also completely the norm and completely fine. Just, I guess the thing that I know Cheryl's cautioned this before too, just make sure that you know that if you are thinking of doing a PhD, you wouldn't be able to get a scholarship for honors, masters, and PhD, if I'm explaining it correctly. So the automatic scholarships based on GPA, just be mindful of that. So some honors students, if they're thinking of going into a PhD, opt to go straight into the PhD, and because you don't need the master's to get the PhD. That makes sense.
It's preferable that you've got a GPA of 8 to go straight into the doctorate from your honors. You can't get an honors and a master's scholarship, but you can have a master's and a PhD scholarship.
Perfect.
They're separated.
As long as you get an A. Right.
As Jess just said, it's you can jump straight into PhD, and you can do it with a with first degree honours, but you might want to just consider what the consequences are if you haven't got a GPA of 8, is that you're paying for your whole PhD if you don't get a scholarship.
Do people realise that you can go to a PhD at the University of Auckland? You need to have that B+ average. But to get funding, you need to have an 8.0 GPA with your most recent qualification, which would either be your honours. Oh, actually, it doesn't work then, Cheryl, because if you have done an honours and a master's, then you can't get the PhD scholarship.
Yes, you can get the PhD scholarship.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah. So if you've done an honours and a master's, you can only have a scholarship for either honours or masters. You don't get it for both. But then the PhD starts all over again. Okay. It's a doctoral scholarship.
Okay.
And the qualifying degree would be the masters. If you do an honours and a masters, qualifying degree for the scholarship would be the masters. If you're going directly from honours, the qualifying degree is just the honours.
So when you go into the PhD, the School of Graduate Studies looks at your most recent highest qualification. So if you had your grade point average slip in your master's, then that's the one that they're going to look at for entry to the PhD.
And the thing I'll just briefly note, because I realize I think I mentioned this, is your grade for your master's, since there aren't courses, if we're talking about the MSc, it's exclusively based on 2 examiners provide a grade for your dissertation. And then you get an overall grade based on the average of those 2. So just keep that in mind. It's not your GPA, but there's no courses or anything like that. And it's not your supervisor saying, you did a great job, I can give you an A+. It's actually 2 external professors who grade your master's. So just something to be aware of.
Rosie asked, should you sort of, if you're not sure about your honours grade, should you line up for a master's, which you can do? And Lawrence said, what happens if you're very close? If you're very close, it's heartbreaking because there's no leeway there. You have to be 8.0 or higher. If you're 7.99, there's no compassion, is there, Cheryl?
No, there isn't. Not at the moment anyway, because there isn't the money to go around, essentially.
Yeah.
I will put a disclaimer on that. If you're a Maori or Pacifica student, then it's a 7.5.
Yeah. But we have made the case for some of our students who are very close, and we've been unsuccessful. Yeah.
And Rosie had a good question as well. You're actually automatically considered for the scholarship we're talking about for your master's when you apply. It's just all automatic based on GPA.
Yeah, and for the PhD as well, right?
Yes.
Or is that right, Cheryl, that if you have the GPA, then when your PhD application is approved, then you're automatically eligible for the scholarship based on your...
Correct.
Yeah.
So there's no application form separately for a scholarship. It's all built into your PhD application, and the School of Graduate Studies will have a look when they send you out the offer letter. If you're eligible for a scholarship, it will be written into that letter. If it's not in the letter, then it means that you didn't get one.
Cheryl, that's a good question for you from Jess W. about if you're 1 paper short of your bachelor's, but with a good GPA.
You can start a master's with 1 paper short, as long as you complete it in the first semester.
But if it's
sorry, I haven't read the
bachelor's, then you'd have to apply for the honours. So it's a tricky thing to do, an extra course during the honours year, because the honours year is so busy. So people have done it, haven't they, Cheryl? But it's a really tough year to do 5 courses when part of that is your honours, especially if it's a stage 3 course.
Yeah. Or PG dip too, right? It's the same thing if you apply for the PG dip to masters or just PG dip. Like the classes in postgrad are pretty full on, I will say. I know students are sometimes struck by that. It's a pretty heavy course load compared to undergrad. Sorry, Cheryl, I cut you off.
Oh no, that's okay, Jess. So yeah, you need to be sure of what you're doing, and it depends also on what the courses that you're missing. So some people might be missing a course that is not their major, and so you might be able to take it over summer school, for example. So we can still make you an offer if you're going to complete that course over summer school, and it would be all done and completed by the time the semester starts. Just be aware that psychology doesn't have any courses in summer school. The other thing is with a PG dip, a lot of people might take 306 alongside their PG dip because they need it to get into masters and they haven't taken it at undergrad. And so that's not uncommon. I won't say it's normal, but it's not uncommon for students to consider doing that.
But a good point is that the honours has to start in semester 1, but the PG dip can start in semester 2. So providing you apply early so that you have places in the courses you want to do, right, Cheryl? Because they tend to get filled up by the students starting at the beginning of the year. So,
so anyone that's ever done undergrad here will know, and honours as well, will know that the courses fill up really quickly at the beginning of the year. So if you've planning on, if you're still in undergrad now and you're in here and you're looking at starting semester 2, make sure you get that application in now for the semester 2 start.
Yeah.
And I will add to that, I think we sort of danced around it, but I don't know if we explicitly mentioned that there's a course you can take in your PG DIP, the 720, that is a research project. You find a supervisor. So there are ways to get research experience in the PG DIP as well versus honors.
And Cheryl, am I right that that 720 research project in the PG DIP can be 15 or 30 points, or is it only 30 points?
It's only 30 points. Okay. It can be, it's normally a full year. It's normally semester 1 and semester 2. There have been very few exceptions where, and this is completely dependent on the supervisor, where they do it in 1 semester. And that's a hard call to get a 30-point research project out in 1 semester. It's a lot of work, and usually you're not doing it alongside anything else.
Yeah. And I guess if students do have to do Psych 306 alongside the PG DIP because I want to go into research or another program, it is possible to do the PG DIP over 3 semesters. Yes. So you can be limited full-time and do 3 courses, for example, for your PG DIP. This is right, Cheryl, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes,
yeah.
I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even, I think it's a little bit trickier for our international students, but they're able to do the limited full-time, aren't they, Cheryl, which is 3 courses?
When you say over part, you're talking about 3 semesters?
Yeah, I'm just thinking to maintain visa status.
That will depend on their visa, and international students should check what the visa requirements are, but usually there is flexibility in a visa that it doesn't need to be a full 60 points per semester. I think it can be 45 points per semester.
Mm. And I guess while students are thinking about their courses and their load, if they have aspirations for going on to PhD or clinical or other things, they need to be aware to look after themselves and to think about what they can manage so that they don't take on so much trying to fit it all into a short time that then they overburden themselves and then they disappoint themselves by not getting the grades that they want. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that it's an important, sometimes it's just worth taking a little bit of extra time just to make sure you're well while you do it and you get a good result, and then you can apply confidently.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
And the other thing, while I realise that most people here are already in their honours year, but make sure that you've chosen subjects that you're good at as well, not just what you think people will want you to have if it's not one of your strengths, because your GPA is important.
Yeah. And usually what you're good at is something that you like, usually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheryl, that's right. The automatic scholarship for both Masters and PhD is at an 8, not a 0.8.
Yeah, it's an 8.0, not a 0.8. Yes. Yes, it is. Yeah, automatic scholarship.
I'll pop the link to because I just found this website today that like sort of gives an overview of how much money these things are and the requirements. So
good. Yeah. The other thing for our Māori and Pacific students, if you're looking at the possibility for a master's or a PhD, even for that matter, that's in a health-related area, then the Health Research Council, HRC, has master's scholarships that provide a fee scholarship, a stipend, and also some expenses for the masters. That application has to happen ahead of time. So if that's something that people are interested in, definitely talk about that with me or Makarena Dudley. I think some of us have had experience of having students get those scholarships, which are very good scholarships to get.
We're almost out of time, so I feel like this is the time if you have any last minute burning questions. And of course, if you didn't get your question answered today, you can email me, or Cheryl, depending on your question, and we can try to help you out and point you in the direction of people who might be a good research fit for you. Oh, I'm glad it was useful. This is actually, believe it or not, the first time we have done one of these. So I think it'll definitely have to be an annual thing. I think it was useful for everybody.
Yeah, good. And you're very lucky if you're in a master's program to have Jess taking care of all these things, because she's very good at looking after the master's students. And Cheryl is, of course, very good at looking after all our postgrad students. So we're lucky to have them.
Cheryl's the best, and hopefully we'll get to be on campus and do lots of fun, social things for the masters.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much again, everyone, for being here, both staff and students. And I hope you're all taking care of yourself. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Stay safe in your bubbles.